respectfully disagree. That's what we like on
Absolutely.
Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, in just a moment on GB News Headliners. But first, let's bring you the latest news headlines. And the top story tonight, the Prime Minister has asked an independent ethics advisor to investigate the Tory party chair's tax affairs. Nadeem Zahawi has welcomed the investigation, saying he's confident he acted properly throughout. The former Chancellor has admitted, though, he paid a penalty to HMRC following an error over shares in the polling company YouGov, which he co-founded. He hasn't disclosed the size of the settlement, which is believed to be almost £5 million. And the BBC's chairman, Richard Sharp, says he will welcome a review into how he got his job by the Commissioner of Public Appointments. That's after Mr Sharp asked for a scrutiny panel to examine potential conflicts of interests following claims he was involved in securing a loan of up to £800,000 for Boris Johnson. He insists he didn't make a loan or arrange any financing and only made an introduction to a guarantor. Now, today, thousands of ambulance workers went out on strike for the third time in 5 weeks. Unison and GMB union members across England and Wales walked out, along with staff from 2 hospitals in Liverpool. And further industrial action is planned in the coming weeks by nurses as well as other NHS workers. Union leaders are calling for fair pay, accusing the government of not wanting to find a resolution. And households that cut down their energy use for a second day tomorrow could save some money. 26 suppliers have signed up to the National Grid's Demand Flexibility Scheme that's run its first live test today. It involves paying businesses and domestic households to turn off their electric appliances for an hour or 2. The electricity network is planning on running the scheme again tomorrow. If you're interested, it runs between 4:30 and 6 p.m. and you have to have a smart meter. Lastly, footballer Harry Kane equalled soccer legend Jimmy Greaves' goal-scoring record for Tottenham Hotspur of 226 goals tonight. The 29-year-old England captain scored the first and only goal of the game during Spurs' Premier League match against Fulham. Greavesy has held the record since 1970. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Headliners.
Thank you, Polly. Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Welcome to Headliners. Joining me tonight to lighten up Tuesday's papers are the ever funny and ever available comedians Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. So, let us quickly get acquainted with Tuesday's front pages. We kick off with the Daily Mail. What the hell is the West waiting for? An extraordinarily powerful and emotional rallying cry there, apparently, by Boris Johnson. The Telegraph has killer posed as a child to claim asylum and then murder again in the UK, and a controversial lion-enhanced dress on the catwalk, appropriately enough. The Eye has Zahawi faces sack as PM demands answers on Tory chair's unpaid tax. The Guardian has Prime Minister admits questions need answering on Zahawi tax. And 2 inquiries launched into the BBC chair selection, a double scandal for the government today. The Times have met risks hiring rogue officers in online tests, and another picture of Zahawi there, looking somewhat shifty. And the Daily Star, finally. You don't need a Daily Star lettuce to see how this one ends. They think that his time is up. So those are the front pages. Let's have a look at them in some more detail. So we're going to start with you, Nick, and the Guardian.
Yes, my favourite paper. So PM admits questions need answering on Zahawi tax. Poor old Nadeem Zahawi in a bit of trouble. So there's his tax issue, and it's not necessarily that he deliberately underpaid his tax, but he had this big tax bill for unpaid tax, and this could be because he was selling off shares, and it gets very complicated. So that's all possibly reasonable. But there's an inquiry into it. Sunak's passed it off to his ethics advisor. Now, there's also the question of the Greensill thing, though, the lobbying scandal, where he was said to have not texted Cameron or messaged Cameron about it, but it turns out he did send messages to Cameron about it, so he's in trouble for that as well. Right. And the question is, how long can he hold on? And it's, and obviously Sunak, when he came in, said we're going to be all about integrity. We've had all Boris's sort of dodginess, and now we're all about integrity. So it looks bad for Sunak. He's passed it off for now, but the question is, how long can Zahawi stay?
Yeah, I suppose the thing with Zahawi and we do all have some sympathy with people making errors in tax returns, but presumably he has a large squad of people dedicated to this purpose. He wouldn't have just been doing it in his lunch hour, would he?
I thought you were going to say we have sympathy with people making massive amounts of money from stocks.
Well, yes, obviously that as well.
And we're not socialists.
He's actually paid it off, right? Not the amount, but he sort of struck a deal. This is the sort of slightly...
Whilst he was Chancellor.
Yeah.
He was only Chancellor for 60-something days.
Yeah, but those are the days where he did it. But also, from my understanding, this is a trust that was set up in his parents' names. He transferred the shares to that trust.
Right.
And then sold the shares. So that seems a little bit dodgy to me.
Well, there's always a distinction, a difficult distinction to be drawn between what feels dodgy and iffy but is legal and where it's actually transgressed, isn't it? But I suppose this ethics probe will get to the bottom of that. 2 inquiries launched into BBC chair selection as well.
Yeah.
Nick, it's a very similar sort of flavour, this.
Yeah, Richard Sharp's selection as BBC chair is subject to 2 separate investigations amid allegations he helped Boris Johnson secure a loan of up to 800,000 weeks before he was recommended for the job. You've probably heard about this already. So it's more Boris just being a bit loose with morals, and poor old Sunak now having to clean up the mess, essentially. Boris was great at winning elections, not so great with details.
No.
Like, don't give someone a job because they've given you a massive loan.
It's not... That one looks to me less palatable, to be honest. The £800,000 loan. I remember Mandelson, of course, this is probably before your time, but Mandelson had to go. He was the great architect of New Labour. But he was caught out for securing an unofficial loan in order to be able to get a house, basically. He was gifted a deposit.
I love how you think young.
You know what? It doesn't necessarily mean... You're right. Nick lent me £800,000 and it means nothing.
No.
And he's the greatest guy in the world.
Exactly. And the fact that Josh has ended up here after, I recommended him is just his talent.
Both of you appear to be here on entirely meritocratic grounds, but now I hear some of this, I'm beginning to scrutinise.
It all fits together, right?
Oh, my God, he hasn't done a decent gag in 13 weeks. So, Josh, you're on the Daily Telegraph. They've obviously gone counterintuitive with who they've handed the papers to, but what are we... This is a fairly... Well, there's a very unsavoury story which is dominating there.
Yes, killer posed as a child to claim asylum and murder again in the UK. It's quite it's a very disturbing story. This is someone who came over in 2019. Of course, the whole point of Brexit was that we could control our borders. By the way, he didn't come over on a little boat or anything. He came over on the ferry. And then when he got here, they're saying he was about 18 at the time, but he claimed he was 14. And because of the law at the moment, at that time, was you were basically anyone who didn't look over 25, they would sort of have to go along with it.
Yeah, right.
And his name, this is, I'm sorry, it is a sad story, except for this is somewhat amusing in that he's given his name. This is a fake name, and it is classically like giving a fake name at the board. You know, like, oh, what's your name? It's Lawanjin Abdullah Rawi. You know, so. That sounds like a fake name, but obviously that wasn't enough. But his crimes are very real, and going back, it turns out that he'd shot and killed 2 Afghani men in Serbia.
Yeah.
He dealt drugs. He had this obsession with knife crime, and then, of course, what's happening at the moment.
Now he's murdered somebody over an e-scooter, like a rental scooter or something.
So it is a really terrible story.
I do remember a lot of these. It was a real flashpoint, wasn't it, many years ago when the Syrian war was at its height, before the Afghani before the end of the Afghani operations. When very obviously young men, some of them not even that young men, you know, were coming over as children, and it was batted back and forth. It was an early sort of culture war football, wasn't it? Do you remember there were some people saying, "Oh, these people are obviously not children," you know, and other people going, "Come on, these young lads have been in a war zone. Of course, they're going to look a bit older and more, you know, shop worn than." Well, I'm afraid it does kind of look as if the suspicions of the right were correct. What about this cat?
Yeah, so there's claws out for cats on the cloud. Well, I thought this was someone who just really didn't like The Lion King.
Yeah.
So supposedly it's a fake head. I think I could get into this. If they sell it down in Primark,
yeah,
I think I'll get one of these.
It's an extraordinarily realistic one, isn't it?
It's very good, yeah. And there's also a little story here. Menopause laws discriminate against men. Now, because it's the front page, we haven't actually been able to get the full story yet.
Yeah.
But the idea, as someone whose wife is going through the menopause, there's no doubt as to the actual implications of the physical effects it does have. But now they're saying that these ideas that have been put forward by the government to sort of make it a protected characteristic, women going through the menopause.
Right.
They're saying that one of the reasons they're looking to stop it is because it would discriminate against men.
Also going through the menopause.
Well, I don't know. There are arguments that the midlife crisis is real.
Tell you what, why are you doing these little sort of more obscure stories? They've really buried at the bottom here. Epstein was murdered in jail, says Maxwell. I mean, that should be a bigger story, shouldn't it?
Well,
that's
it's
tiny.
Suspicions, isn't it? I want to just mention, because it's my private interest, that lion is part of a general catwalk theme. Do you know what the theme was? It wasn't big cats. It's actually Dante's Inferno. The lion represents pride or ego or something like that. And there's somebody coming down the back with a bronze head who's all part of it as well. So
what does the bronze head represent?
I don't know.
Because it looks like it's got fake breasts onto it as well, moulded breasts.
I doubt very much he's kind of really read into it in any detail. But anyway, the Times, Nick, what have we got? More Zahawi, what else?
Yeah, well, we've got Met risks hiring rogue officers in online tests, which is an absolute shocker. As you'll know, the police has been having a few shockers recently with some of the people it hired who might be, for example, mass rapists. Well, this is another cost of lockdown because during the pandemic, they thought, we'll just do online interviews. How about that? Other police forces have brought proper interviews back, but the Met hasn't. So they're just still doing these online interviews. Bit of a problem when it's the police. And it says here, well, they've approached them and it says it's reintroducing an interview element. What element? What is the element? They tell you their name. I mean, element, just do interviews.
Not enough.
So, yeah, it's infuriating.
I do remember saying, just to be sort of contrarian about it briefly, or the devil's advocate, the interview process, the traditional interview process, is not always the best way of getting the best candidates. It might well depend on whether you're looking for character or whether you're looking for competence. Those are slightly different issues. But it has been demonstrated that if you actually hire based on CVs, as long as they can be checked, fact-checked, you know, as long as people aren't just getting away with blatant lies, you tend to get better outcomes than you do a lot of people who think they're very good at hiring really tend to have a lot of biases that aren't corrected for, you know,
that's
in a face-to-face interview.
I tend to hire just based on looks.
Yeah, beard you look for.
But
yeah.
don't you
Looks,
think...
yes, beard, no hair.
Maybe you're right, but don't you think with some of the people they've been hiring, gut instinct could have been quite useful? Like if I was confronted with an obvious wrong end, do you know what I mean?
I do think that with the police force, you are probably going to get the same sort of wrong elements that you've always got in the police force that are indeed probably interviewing the new recruits to some extent.
Also,
but you might not get the new kind of wrong ones. I don't know.
Yeah, well, ask what their nickname is. If your nickname is Big B Stard
Big Fern
or whatever, is that there might be giveaways
Total
there.
psycho, yeah.
And what's this thing about forget Fido, man's best friend?
Well, this is a very important story, Sam. This is how man's best friend can actually be a pig, not the dog, as was traditionally thought. So pigs show just as much affection for their owners, but the problem is communication. They can't communicate that they want the person to give them the food. They stubbornly try and get the food. Pig-headed, basically.
Right.
They stubbornly try and press on with solving the problem themselves, whereas if they just sort of appeal to human sort of altruistic need to help or to feel important, they could somehow hook us in and be our best friend.
I seem to remember we covered a story about a year ago about how dogs have evolved the ability to do that sort of Pixar thing with their eyebrows and look longingly and meltingly into our eyes, whereas pigs, of course, have never had that opportunity. But famously, it is probably quoted in here, Churchill was fond of pigs, wasn't he? Regarded them as...
I can give you the quote if you want.
Is it in there?
Yeah, he says that dogs look up to you, cats look down on you. Give me a pig, he looks you in the eye and treats you as an equal.
Exactly, and provides you with breakfast. Here it is, the perfect animal.
They left that out, perhaps due to...
They are big and heavy, aren't they? I know there was a little bit of a trend a few years ago for people getting micro pigs or Vietnamese pot-bellied pigs and so on, were thought to be potential pets. People, even the small ones, get to be pretty hefty. There was one that used to get walked around Hove.
Oh, really?
On a lead, yeah.
So they're micro, but it's all relative, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
do you know their fate?
Haven't seen him lately. Finally, the star, before we go to our first break. Let's romp through this. Puppies dumped in costs crisis, not necessarily for pigs. And the main story is about a lettuce. I assume this is another thing that's going to go off.
Yeah, they're bringing back their greatest moment over the last year. You don't need to be a Daily Star lettuce to see how this one ends. But it is interesting because poor old Rishi Sunak is kind of damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. Like, if he doesn't do anything, then it's the accusations of sleaze continue and it goes against this idea that he's meant to be cleaning things up and whatnot. By the way, they still haven't rehired an independent investigator, who left under Johnson.
They can manage without Zahawi, though. He's his party chairman. It's not even as if he's...
No, exactly. But of course, if he does leave, then it just gives more ammunition.
Yeah.
Look, you've got another Tory who's had to leave under a sleaze cloud.
Anyway, I think it's not Sunak who's not likely to outlast the lettuce, is it?
It's Zahawi.
No, it's all
That's
right,
why they're saying we save ourselves 60p on leafy veg. They're saying it's not even worth buying the lettuce. Poor old Zahawi.
That's the front pages out of the way. Join us in part 2. We'll discuss Tory COVID testing firm scandals. There are more scandals yet. The truth behind antidepressants and how even Jesus Christ is having a 2023 gender switch-up. See you in a couple of minutes.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
And welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. I'll be taking you through Tuesday's top stories. Joining me tonight, top comedians Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. So, Josh, Tory scandals in The Guardian. Health Minister has big stake and he's driving it through the heart of this vampire government.
Yeah, nice. The sleaze continues.
Yeah.
Conservative Health Minister has big stake in COVID testing firms. So this is an exclusive. Nick Markham, who co-founded something called Signpost Investments.
With a C.
Yeah, with a C. Yeah, I know. He's, during the pandemic, he was given a peerage by Liz Truss, and basically there's this whole idea that there's this conflict of interest now because he is a health minister.
Yep.
Now, what he was doing, that it never actually worked directly for the NHS. It was all like private health care or private health testing. But there's still, like, you know, they made a lot of money. We're talking like millions, about pre-tax profit of £15 million. And, of course, this is going to be affected by government policy in terms of, you know, saying that now tests have to be paid for rather than being free and all of this stuff. So, you know, I'm not saying that there is, like, direct evidence of him sort of using his position to personally profit, but it ain't good at the same time.
No, it's not good, and it starts to feel very much of a
trend.
Of peace with the last days of the Tory government. Although I have to say, I will also take issue with Angela Rayner, who says there is a rotten stench about the revolving door the Tories have left wide open, which suggests to me she doesn't understand how revolving doors work.
Mate, I wouldn't be surprised.
Locked or unlocked.
She's not one of my favourites even at all.
They're sort of revolving or static, aren't they? Sometimes they're just static.
If I either left the door open or a cat flap, I suppose, something like that. I always think of corruption as being a cat flap rather than a door. You know,
just
rats and things can get in.
Do you think Sunak will attack on that, as if she tries to attack him in the House of Commons? Well, you can't even get your metaphors right.
Your analogies suck.
Nicola Sturgeon with the next one. Nick, this is an Independent. It turns out. Is this the... we've dropped one, have we? About the... the decapitate TERFs.
Oh, you want to do that one?
Yeah. Have we got that one? Maybe I've jumped one. OK, sorry, let's go through
we were going to do
antidepressants.
We'll do antidepressants, why not?
It doesn't so much boost your mood as narrow its range.
This is the sun. Antidepressants can take away enjoyment along with emotional pain. So it's kind of what we always suspected. They make you feel nothing. And, I mean, they've debunked the chemical aspect a while ago. This idea that there's a chemical imbalance has been debunked. But this is about whether they inhibit the sort of reward centres so that people don't want to really do as much because they don't feel good when they do something. Yeah. But the problem is, and they did a test and they found, some people got the placebo, some people got this escitalopram. And, but the only problem with it is that the same symptoms could also apply to just being depressed. So you don't feel the reward and the joy because you're depressed. So it's still not totally clear if it's the medication or not.
I do think there's a massive movement, isn't there, at the moment, from the big pharmacological brands all the way down to sort of YouTube influencers and so on to fiddle and try and hack your serotonin and dopamine receptors. There's this kind of idea that you find a magic key and you can unlock all kinds of things from overcoming your inclination to putting things off and procrastination and to how to motivate yourself. It's never quite as easy as
there is a magic key. It's called exercise. That'll do it. But yeah, this article, like one of the results indicated there was a reduced reinforcement sensitivity on 2 tasks for the escitalopram group compared to those on placebo. Basically, this article is so annoyingly, frustratingly written, it makes me want to go on antidepressants just to get through to the end of it.
That is the overwhelming feeling I get most nights on Headlines. Most of the news. I do think it would be lovely if you could take antidepressants and they just elevated your mood without any kind of distortion. But the reality is there's always going to be a payoff, isn't there? But I suppose if it takes some of the sharp corners out of life, but then that's what booze is for, isn't it, as well? You know what I mean?
I thought you were going to say that's what life's all about, the ups and downs, but you went with booze.
No, use booze. Yeah, booze and cheese.
No, heroin for me, but...
Daily Mail now. I apologise for trying to jump ahead to this story, but it's the latest on the notorious Decapitate Turf sign at the Scottish Trans Rally. We're off with her head.
Indeed. Nicola Sturgeon condemns Decapitate Turf's placard seen near SNP politicians at Glasgow pro-trans rights rally as First Minister calls on UK ministers to have the guts to appear before Holyrood Committee over Westminster's block on her gender reforms. Part life.
Yeah. Genuinely, who would have guessed, whenever Blair it was who sort of started the devolution process, that this would be the issue on which we would finally come apart?
It's insane, isn't it?
It's extraordinary.
But this
is... all the things that England and Scotland have held dear and differently over the years.
So these placards that were at this rally in Glasgow, and there are a bunch of SNP MPs there, and behind them are just these very violent calls to violence towards TERFs, or what they call TERFs, but basically women's trans exclusionary radical feminists, but essentially women standing up for women's rights, mostly. So now they're all turning around going, oh no, I didn't see that. It's like, all of them are like, I didn't see that.
Well, they're not turning around, that's the problem.
But they all saw it, and there are photos of these signs before they got there, so there's no way they didn't see it.
And they look increasingly gleeful and I don't know, they seem to be crazed themselves in their own faces.
But this is what got me into the whole argument years ago, to see the calls to violence towards women, the bullying that comes from, rather than just having a debate, there was a debate last night on Free Speech Nation on this channel, which was an amicable debate between people arguing about their rights. That's what it should have been years ago, instead of this instant call for violence. And because no one called it out before now, this has been allowed to fester and they think it's normal. And by the way, you also had Labour MPs at a rally or a demonstration in front of Westminster last week, and they were on standing on a platform with someone who's been to jail for like a trans woman who has been in jail for torturing their stepmother's brother or something like that, and then they're all claiming, oh, we didn't know who that is. So this is like a common theme. Is like, oh no, we didn't know. Well, you're happy enough to stand up there, and maybe you should actually do some more reading into this issue.
It does seem that there are like two distinct breeds, and I think a lot of the pre-existing trans women and trans men, presumably as well, who are just trying to lead quiet lives and not attract any unnecessary attention to themselves, seem to have been weaponised by an even tinier fraction of society who just absolutely want to kick off.
Yeah, absolutely, because there's only 0.5% of trans and non-binary people, so it can't be them. Yeah, and this is Matt Sturgeon said things like, I don't think it's fair or credible to suggest that the elected representatives who are there in any way share or condone those views. It totally is, though, isn't it? I mean, and she says that the way those views were expressed, she would condemn the way those views were expressed. I mean, how can you express these views in a good way? I mean, the thing about Sturgeon, people wonder if it's just a political football because she wants to get independence and she's using, for example, the gender recognition bill. But as far as my research, she actually does genuinely believe that she's bought into this idea. It's this progressive idea, which is mad. But
even though it's not actually very popular in Scotland either, is it?
No, it's radically unpopular. It's crazy. All the polls show it's very unpopular, so it's absolutely mad. But there can only really be one winner, can't there? Because the so-called TERFs versus the trans rights activists, it can't be... There's no compromise, really, is there?
Well, I think that people get so embedded within this issue, and as someone who plays, am I going to be a hypocrite here because I'm so embedded in it?
Yeah.
Is there any way for me to? I try and see the other points of view, but I'm not going to agree that there are more than two sexes.
If we want to get to that point, what will happen eventually? I assume the best solution will be something similar to the Good Friday Agreement, which is essentially a fudge which allows both sides to believe that they've won. But the only way you can do that is by taking all the heat out of the situation and having everyone settle down and pretend to look the other way a little bit.
You might have to look the other way in a changing room, because how can the changing room possibly be resolved?
Women's sports, women's prisons, these are lines in the sand.
Third places, I guess. Nick, Guardian now. Po-faced protesters trying to deny Northern Ireland's cultural heritage.
Well, yeah, this is bikinis and balaclavas. So Northern Ireland Spa Resort apologises over a depraved ad. And this is in Ballymoney in County Antrim. And they were criticised. I don't know if we have a picture. It's essentially an image of...
Oh,
there we go. I mean, I can't really describe it. You can see what it is.
Like,
for the radio listeners...
something, don't they?
This looks like my pornography.
For those listening on the radio, it is some women in bikinis with balaclavas.
That is powerfully erotic. I don't see how...
For the radio listener, it's not.
Where are the guns?
It's quite tasteless. Even for... You hear what it is. It's then even more tasteless than you thought it was going to be, isn't it? It could have been done in a sort of cooler way.
So what are they offering, like a spa, but it's in Northern Ireland?
There's a shooting range as well. You get a spa and then you get to shoot guns. And some people are saying it's a bit bit of fun. Some people said, it's what made this balaclava is what made this country famous.
Yeah.
Whereas others are saying, it's the Troubles. And I noticed I was at a party with Andrew Doyle. They don't really like it when you make jokes about that. So some people are a bit sensitive about it.
Well, maybe it's one of those things that they can make jokes about and we can't. I suppose there could be that. But there doesn't seem to be, there doesn't seem to be consensus even on that level.
No, but, it's alliteration.
Yes.
And that's what they...
And it does, and not just alliteration, it's got a rhythm to it as well, doesn't it? It's got all
bikinis and balaclavas. That's the lead song from my album.
Yeah, it sounds like an old Sparks album from the late 70s, I would say. Finishing this section with Tuesday's Times, Jesus is having his 2023 revamp.
Yeah, Jesus Christ Superstar gets gender-neutral makeover. You know what? There's a bunch of theatre productions in the past that have done this thing where they switch the sex of the lead, they've female Hamlets and whatnot, and actually that can bring a new interpretation to the play and see it in a different way. This isn't that. This is a non-binary or gender-neutral production.
OK.
Now, there's no such thing as non-binary or gender-neutral. It's an ideology.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be interested to see what it would be like if there was female Jesus and how that story might be told in a slightly different way. But this isn't that play. And that's what annoys me about it. And then also, like, the apostles were all in, they said, we tried to hire under a totally gender-neutral thing, but then, what, it's a coincidence that there are no men in it at all?
Have you seen you've seen Jesus Christ Superstar?
No.
Do you know the story?
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
I don't even know who Jesus is.
Some of it.
I mean, it's quite interesting. It's very interesting, an extraordinary phenomenon. For a start, it didn't start off as a stage musical. They tried to get funding for it, it failed, and they made an album initially, which sold hugely. And I only discovered this quite recently. Is Ian Gillan as from Deep Purple as Jesus Christ, which was pretty hard rock credentials at the time. It was quite a cool and cult thing. The fact that Andrew Lloyd Webber has become, a little bit associated with ripping off, bits, snatches of classical music and making schlocky kind of big Hollywood and Broadway and West End productions. But Jesus Christ Superstar was actually quite a countercultural event at the time.
Well, this is even further.
So this is what I'm saying. It's not actually an inappropriate artifact to take and push again, because Jesus Christ Superstar, the plot is mainly about Judas Iscariot as a kind of PR man. And
PR woman in this case.
Is this, but that's all fine, I think, because it is already, it's pretty, I don't know, what would you call it, blasphemous?
Well, it was called sacrilegious originally.
Sacrilegious.
Originally it counts. This is like sacrilege upon sacrilege. I mean, whatever you think to the original, the creative producer says Jesus is remembered as being a man. Yes, he was a man. Then it says, but then he says,
a man.
He says, but who are we to decide? None of us were around 2,000 years ago. Now, if you go off that premise, then all of Christianity is basically over, isn't it? We can't decide because it was 2,000 years ago.
Also, the world is round. But who are we to decide?
It's appalling. And, of course, as we always say, we don't necessarily always say it, but you can't do this with other religions. You can do anything you like to Christians and Christianity, and maybe we've been too soft and allowed that kind of thing to happen. It's just a kind of insult to Christianity. That's my view.
I suppose it is, but I don't think it's any more of an insult to Christianity than the original thing was. And in a way, I think it's more of an insult, probably, to Tim Rice than it is to
maybe both.
Well, he's insisted all the lyrics stay the same, by the way, so they're not changed them. So it says, "I don't know how to love him."
Yeah.
So it's I don't know. I think it's just a bit weird. Whatever.
Fair enough. Well, I mean, between you have a Jew and an actual Christian. Who am I as a secular aficionado of musicals? I think it's all right. That's it for part 2. But join us in part 3 for the latest song to cause offence. We have the latest word to cause offence and just how offended Russian commanders are by beards. Possibly back to Jesus Christ Superstar for that. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. Let's get straight into it. Josh, we have our next story. Every day I say a little prayer that the trans nonsense will come to an end and that people will R-E-S-P-E-C-T reality. But no, not today, it seems.
Not today. Now Aretha Franklin's song Natural Woman is deemed offensive to trans women. Outrage as activists demand song is removed from Spotify and Apple Music. And when you start reading the story, they're like, oh, come on, please.
It's got to be a parody, right?
Well, that's what they're sort of leading to. It has to be, because later on, this is from a Twitter account, but they're saying it's a Norway-based Transcultural Mindfulness Alliance, and they're basically calling for the song to be banned because it helps perpetuate harmful anti-trans stereotypes, a.k.a. science.
So the idea that there is a natural
There's such a thing as a
natural... Do you think
woman.
Aretha was saying that you make me feel like a natural woman rather than a trans woman, which is how she'd been feeling until that point?
Yeah, of course. That was the subtext. That was exactly what she was getting to. But then
Carole King, isn't it, who wrote that song? She covered it herself later on Tapestry.
OK.
Carole King, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Jewish.
Not Carole Queen, Carole King.
Carole King,
yeah,
lovely Jewish woman there.
Thing going in.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Oh, I see. Sorry, but yeah. But also they had some other tweets where they're saying that they want to do studies into the gender identities of pets. So they keep this article keeps on going. Maybe it's a scam, but
it's definitely a parody account. The account was founded in 2009, but this has only emerged in 2023. So someone's changed their bio. And if you weren't sure, they do things like they say they want pronounpedia, although there is something quite similar to that is real. But then they said they want to ensure this isn't used by bigots to hunt transgenders, which is not how transgender people would talk. And then they say that Lionel Richie's 3 Times a Lady is actually about a non-binary person. Just look at the account, guys. But you see what's happened here with the Mail. They've said the post, perceived by many as parody. It's like, that means I've written the article, I've realised it's parody, but I don't want to write a new one, so I'm just going to put perceived by... I mean, they say they're going to open a chapter in each European country and also North... I mean, it's nonsense. It's an obvious parody account. I actually had to text my friends to see if anyone had written it themselves, because it could be Andrew Doyle or one of my other friends.
Yeah.
It isn't.
It's a pretty good parody, but we'll give it a parody.
Well, the thing is that you could actually imagine that it is offensive.
That's the problem, yeah.
To some activists.
Yeah, exactly.
Over to the Sun now. This definitely isn't parody. This is coming from the United Nations. It seems video games are using simulations of real-world terror attacks to radicalise kids. Wonder if this is how Jeremy Corbyn got his start.
Yeah, they've gone with Prime to Kill. So this is an urgent warning as video games simulate real-world terror attacks from Christchurch to Bataclan. And of course, they always used to say that, video games are making people violent, but the thing is now there's more credence to that because you can actually communicate and talk to young kids and recruit them and so on.
Yeah.
Then again, it said they're recruiting far-right groups, and we never know anymore what that word actually means.
Why is it far-right? Why are they not recruiting Islamic terrorists?
Well, they are as well. They are as well. ISIS have apparently done it. But, I mean, it says a little bit of a question mark, because it says according to the ADL, but the ADL also wanted Twitter shut down when Elon Musk took over, so I will just say that. Don't totally trust them. But, yeah, I mean, it could definitely happen as a real thing. This guy who was a mass shooter said, I probably wouldn't be as nationalistic if it weren't for blood and iron on Roblox. So it can, this can happen,
Roblox, that's
Then again, on the other hand, the gaming community is sort of very irreverent and funny, and it can also be an attempt to sort of shut down, an irreverent movement.
Like the Gamergate thing. I suppose my question is, Are these far-right or Islamic or whatever terror cells creating games in order to, or are they just monitoring game use?
I believe that they are also creating games. This is not a new thing at all. It's actually such a sort of known phenomenon that it's been in plot points in different sort of TV shows, spy TV shows and stuff, where they actually were like going in as like undercover in these games to then root out other sort of members, Islamic members.
And whatever. So somebody else's like a multiplayer game.
Yeah, exactly. And then you would sort of ingratiate yourself with them and start talking about stuff.
So you just sort of like have a cigarette break with them on screen, as it were, and.
Well, you would chat whilst you're playing the game, but there were these people were creating far-right and Islamists who are creating these games as a sort of like real-life things and then using them almost as training as well. So this is not a new thing.
Quite exciting, isn't it?
Well...
Are there other ones where you can go and do something nice with multiplayer, like kind of just, run an allotment together or something? I want to sort of steer my son towards doing
I'd like Super Mario Kart.
They used to do Minecraft.
It always starts with the allotment, Simon, that's the problem.
Yeah, they used to just do a bit of world building and they used to
my kids are obsessed with Minecraft.
Yeah.
They're always like, Dad, look at this. I've built this thing. And you're just like, yeah, mate, whatever.
Yeah, build a shed. Get out there and build me an actual
go and join
shed.
ISIS and join one of those
Starts
games.
with Minecraft, ends with blood and iron. That's how it goes.
So the Times now, Josh, you may be 3,000 years old, eviscerated and wrapped in bandages, but words can still be used to dehumanise you.
I know.
Is that right?
Very, very hurtful.
Yeah.
Because they're still alive. Or they will come back. Museums scrap mummy label for corpses over colonial legacy. This is maybe the stupidest story of the day. National Museums Scotland, who obviously have too much money to be hiring people who are going to be coming up with this kind of stuff, they're looking at people who once lived. That's like the politically correct term.
Right, people who are living
to dead
with death.
people who once lived. And it comes from, and they're also trying to connect it to colonialism because the word mumia, which is an Arabic word, ties somehow into mummified remains. It's like, it's so tenuous and utterly ridiculous.
Is it?
Yeah, no. Well, that's
if they were called mummy because they looked like the governor's mummy or something, that would be. But it's not. It's an Arabic word for tar.
I know. It's so annoying. And as someone at the end points out, Jeremy Black, author of Imperial Legacies, museums, when they cut themselves off from popular culture, they show contempt for how we understand words. And that's it. Like, mummy, that's what draws you. I took the kids to the museum recently, and it was exciting. Guys, come on, let's check out the mummies. Like, now we have to start referring to them as people who once lived in the mummified remains. It's pathetic.
And now it's going to become an acronym, isn't it? Mummified origin.
They suggested mummified person, which is lols.
And anyway, a lot of them are cats.
Yeah, this idea, that's true. And then also, people who once lived, that's almost everyone.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Almost.
Except for the people alive now and the ones in the future. I mean, that is pretty much everyone.
It's discrimination if you just talk about the mummy, But
nobody looks at them. I mean, possibly there are some sort of totems where you can't immediately tell that you're looking at a human remains or a human representation. But a mummy is very obviously, they're not dehumanised, they're very obviously people, aren't they? That's the whole fascination. It's not like that has eluded kids.
Yeah, no, it's... Anyway.
Angry. Stop wasting our money. Nick, Russian news from the Times now. The spirit of Peter the Great is alive and well, even if thousands of Russian soldiers aren't.
Yes, beards banned by Russian commander. And as you mentioned, Peter the Great famously had a beard tax back in 1698. The reason he did it was to fall more in line with Western standards, which I don't think Putin is too worried about. He spends quite a lot of time bashing the West. But, you could have you had to have a beard, and if you didn't have your beard, well, you had to pay your tax, and if you didn't, Peter the Great could just shave you, not necessarily him personally, but he would just forcibly and publicly shave you. Simpler times. And this sort of recalls that a little bit, but this is General Valery Gerasimov, and he's very concerned about their beards, and they're saying they could at least have 15 to 20 minutes to, sharpen their appearance up. And the criticism from our Ministry of Defence is that he's prioritising these things because he's out of touch and it's all kind of nonsense. Then again, it's not that new, is it, in the army to have rigorous codes of appearance?
No, I seem to remember the army do encourage you to shave generally, but the Navy used to actually give you a slight bonus if you didn't shave. That was my father told me that. Anyway, during his national service, you were encouraged to grow a beard because it was considered to be a couple of extra minutes you could be useful, I suppose.
What about the SAS and, the American Special Forces? They've got a whole big thing about beards.
Have they?
That, they all grow their beards, and that shows that they're part of, an elite unit. But I think having a beard is not necessarily, it would catch on wire. if you're crawling underground. You know, there are practical implications.
Well, it could have kept you out. I would imagine.
Well, you're just trying to stay out of the military. That's why you've got it.
Yeah, well, I pay my taxes.
Seriously, if you're like kind of in some horrible muddy hole in minus 10 degrees through the winter, it's quite grateful for a bit of covering, a bit of fur on the face. That's why I tend to grow one through the winter.
Actually, full body for me.
Yeah.
Just in case.
The bears. The Russian bear. I've amused myself with that. The Guardian have news of yet another nation growing old and not growing babies.
Yes, Japan's ageing population poses urgent risk to society, says PM Fumio Kishida. The PM of Japan is basically calling this out because they've got a real problem over there. It's actually the second highest proportion of people aged 65 and over in the world. The tiny state of Monaco is number one, if anybody's going to enter a pub quiz in the future.
Not a big problem there.
No, so births dropped to below 800,000 last year. And they've been trying now for years to bring in these different policies, helping parents, giving them subsidies and whatnot. But it's a massive issue because of cost of living over there is very expensive as well. And critics are saying that they're targeting people who've already got kids. Really, they need to be focusing on young people, giving the opportunities to have their own homes and properties. But the other thing is, of course, that there's a huge amount of virgins in Japan.
Wow, really?
Yeah, a lot of people who were very put off by the whole...
very strange... I mean, there's all sorts of cultural implications and aspects to this. Obviously, there's a very famous fact about the Japanese is their longevity anyway. Traditionally, they were always studying their diet, which kind of fish were they eating, what kind of vegetables and daily practices were considered to be, would help with longevity, because it was assumed that was simply a good thing, longevity. But of course, it comes at a cost. And the other thing is they do have there are certain traditional like anime and hentai, and there are some very strange, sort of vaguely masturbatory traditions that are sort of almost like not pornographic, more like a kind of subculture where you have they have sort of full-sized inflatable pillow wives and things. You know about these?
No, I haven't been on those sites.
Yeah, honestly, some very strange stuff.
I've heard about them.
They've got a 1.34 per woman birth rate, which is a disaster anyway. Yeah. And it says here, and obviously I'm a big feminist, Simon, but it says here that there are factors like including the rising living costs and people having children later, but also more women entering the workforce. So that could literally end the species, which would be a bit of a disaster.
Well, there are three... Basically, every developed nation is confronting this issue. People are living longer, people are having fewer children. You have three options. You either accept falling living standards, because a lot of your wages are going to support the people who have stopped working at the end of life, or you encourage immigration, which the Japanese are not doing, or you hope that there's some kind of automation, there's some kind of robotic sort of solution to the whole thing, which, you're going to basically... And I think that's what Japan is hoping for, because they have extraordinarily low immigration and that they're very strongly opposed to it. No, I mean, just literally, robots.
Oh,
basically,
I see. Okay.
They just automation will look after their elderly.
So I was thinking about the Matrix or something. You sort of spend.
Japan will try that before immigration. They'll be like, if we do immigration, they'll be like, what about robots? They'll do anything else.
Deep freeze. That's all for part 3. Join us in the final part of the show for Gary Lineker's controversial sex noises, some sex noises Gen Z don't find controversial, and a 4-year-old boy who will make us all question our own intelligence. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to the final part of Headliners tonight. In the Telegraph now, Gary Lineker's sex noises continue to arouse controversy, Nick.
Yeah, Gary Lineker refused to apologise despite BBC asking 3 times to say sorry. So if you somehow missed this, it was during the football. Someone had actually taped an old Nokia phone to the set of the studio in quite a sort of, quite innovative DIY.
Prank.
Yeah, kind of like people would do with a bomb or something. But what they did was it was playing loud sex noises.
So was that the calls? What you've got the call night, like the ringtone for this Nokia was the sex noise, or did they ring? It was okay.
It was incredibly loud. And if you watch the clip, Gary Lineker's laughing, trying to carry on with the football commentary. But he was refusing to apologise, which is bizarre because obviously kids could be watching, anyone could be watching. Yeah. And what you do is just an arbitrary apology, perfectly normal. But Lineker says he thinks it's funny and he won't apologise. And it's kind of bizarre display of power to show that, he's so big, he doesn't need to apologise for this.
Weird,
it's not a cancel culture issue. It's a completely standard, normal...
You can apologise quite safely and just move on, but instead he's made it a much bigger thing than it needed to be. It's not like he's apologising for genocide or something.
Well, look, I'm not a fan of his at all.
No.
And this happened, it was on air he was asked to apologise. So, you got your person in your ear and they're saying, just say sorry, say sorry. Yeah. And his argument was, he didn't cause it. The BBC didn't cause it. It wasn't their fault. So why should he apologise for it? Now, I'm
sorry if you overheard it.
I'm old school British, so for me, I'll literally apologise for anything at any time that has nothing to do with me and not my fault. But he has a point. It wasn't his fault, but
no, because on the football,
you could make it as a slightly pedantic point, though. It feels
it's a pedantic point, but that's what.
There's no point. I mean, often on the football you overhear swearing and things like that, and they always say, "Oh, sorry if you overheard any language there." It's the manager on the touchline. It's a fan. They still apologize. It doesn't mean it's their fault. It just means if you heard it, it's our broadcast, so we own it.
I was in a beer garden. We were waiting for all our lunches to arrive, and somebody's fish finger sandwiches were late, and we said so to the fellow who was bringing them out. He goes, "Well, what can I do? It's the kitchen." I'm like, "Well, come on, that's not how it works, is it? There's collective responsibility for these fish finger sandwiches."
It's
anyway,
similar.
Josh, sticking with audio erotica, slightly more consensual than match of the day, but it sounding like you're having sex is as close as young people want to get to it these days.
Well, the woke way to do porn. Gen Z are turning to audio erotica because it provides a safe haven for sexual exploration. Now, this is ridiculous because men are proven to be visually stimulated. So this really is more about women, and I can see that this would work more so where it's fantasy and then more internalised and audio.
And it's not just panting. This is like stories, like
stories, a bit of narrative. I mean, this might be how I can fulfil my dream of becoming a porn actor. So I'm a porn actor, and then audio.
Because you never visually convince us.
No, absolutely, in any capacity. So and then it's like he turns out, oh no, I'm a vocal.
Because I did work in the porn industry.
I did not know this.
Do you know
what were you doing?
I used to write readers' letters.
You're the fluffer.
Yeah. I used to write readers' letters for magazines, half a dozen at a time.
Makes sense.
And,
okay.
I was quite creative for a couple of years.
I didn't know this. Good money?
Scenarios.
It's explaining why you were so
money, but it was fairly easy work, and it got my typing speed up.
Was one of your letters like, I was hosting a show on midnight television, and then the panelists dropped their pants?
To men, this is weird, isn't it? There was a book, though, of female... Did you know this? There was a book called, I think it was called A Secret Garden. It was a collation of female sexual fantasies, and it's all... A lot of them are quite abstract and weird. I've listened to it a few times. A lot of them are quite abstract.
Have you heard of this?
Have you heard of this? But because men are far more visual, as you say. So no man would actually enjoy this, really, would they? Just listening to it would be like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, I can listen to a story. I find. Yeah,
but you're in the industry.
Yeah.
You're doing for research.
I would always judge it. That's the trouble. I'm kind of going, no, I don't think it's not. He's used the wrong.
Yeah. He wouldn't use that tool.
The wrong wrench.
Yeah.
Daily Mail now, Nick. It's about 10 minutes to midnight here, but according to the Bulletin of Economic Scientists, it might be a bit later than that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, it is actually literally that now. Yeah. So, what is the Doomsday Clock? So, this is all about Doomsday Clock, which was invented in 1947. It's by artist Martel Langsdorff. It's really an artistic thing, and the idea is it was to show that with nuclear escalation, we're all getting ourselves in trouble, and it was to emphasise that point. It said it would frighten men into rationality. Narrator, it didn't. Yeah. You know, it didn't work, but there it is. And they tried to, and now they move it back and forth. When there was the Soviet Union kicking off, they moved it a bit nearer. And of course now it's because of climate change, they're moving it nearer and stuff. But so it was meant to be for nuclear power. It's gone down in.
Have they invited other scientists in? Because presumably the atomic guys aren't anywhere.
I think it seems to be the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists seem to decide it mainly. What were you going to say, Josh?
No, I was just saying that it has been open. Yeah, it's not just about that's what it's called as the Board of Atomic Scientists, but it's actually a whole load of things. And it's COVID. But obviously we have the war in Ukraine.
It's like the basket of things that are monitored for inflation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I got to read this. This is my favourite sentence of the evening. Artist Martel Langsdorff, and then it talks about co-editor Hyman Goldsmith, and according to Eugene Rabinovich, my Jewish brothers are in the house. That's the most Jewish sentence.
Rabinovich was the sort of presided over the whole thing early days, I think, wasn't he? He was quite famous.
Yeah. So
makes sense, doesn't it? Because if Jewish people are running the world, of course they'd be the most concerned about it ending.
They have.
Let's clip that up.
I said if.
Appealing to your fan base there, Nick.
Is there slightly heightened amygdala? I do find it slightly. I don't know what the word is. There should be a word for it, but it is interesting how they are kind of presenting everyone with a kind of anxiety. But it's just like that whole kind of, as you say, you know, let's live more rationally, a narrator over voice, will it failed. But the truth is we did actually steer our way through the Cold War, and arguably it was mutually assured destruction rather than... I'm sure Bertrand Russell, for instance, was a great fan of the nuclear Armageddon clock, you know, inching its way towards midnight. Oh, my God, we must disarm. But that, in fact, would have been catastrophic.
Yeah, but the point is, with Putin now, it's gone back up again, surely, the threat, the risk again.
It went down to about... I was born in 1965. It was at 12 minutes to midnight. I mean, virtually no threat at all at that point. It's like a 20 mile per hour zone.
Well, it's not exactly scientific, because he said that he first said, I think it's 7 minutes to midnight, and he was just like, oh, yeah, because I like the look of it.
Yeah,
it is actually a piece of very popular art. That's all it actually is.
The Guardian now, Josh. More cheerful news. This is the boy who is going to save us from nuclear and other catastrophes. He's already been born. He lives in Somerset and he's 4, is that right?
Hopefully. British boy who taught himself to read age 2 joins Mensa. Teddy Hobbs. And he taught himself to read and count, including in Mandarin.
Nice.
But he can only probably do it to like 5 or 6 or something like that. But yeah, just this is an advert for just leaving your kids on the iPad.
Yeah.
Because this kid just was like playing on the iPad and
there
just
he is. There's a picture of him.
There he is. Yeah.
They've given him ridiculous glasses to heighten it. There's no need for that.
No,
he's smart enough without those drawn.
And he basically just taught himself to read. I mean, as a very bad parent and teacher, I wish that my kids were that clever.
But the parents thought he was just making noises, like, no, I'm reading in Chinese. That's a sort of proud/chilling moment, isn't it, when you realise that?
Yeah.
But my big question is, could he beat me in an arm wrestle? That's the point, though, John. Has he got any life experience?
You're treating him very much as like the threat of AI.
Yeah. Well, you know, my IQ's a mere 137 on the last test I did, so I'm not in this league, Simon, but, you know...
mate, you're just right in the paddock.
I'm near to genius. I don't know what's yours.
There should be... I was a Mensa member when I was young, but
Inevitable.
It was me and Jimmy Savile back in the day.
You were a bit older than this guy. You were 6.
It was originally... IQ was originally developed to test brainiac kids and then get them sort of herded away so that they could be taught at the correct speed. That was, I think, that the whole point of it was initially a thing for kids. It's now sort of seen as a reverse... You know, it's kind of weird to measure a young child's IQ, but it was basically a way of saying what is their learning age rather than what is your chances of running a FTSE 100 company or whatever.
Well, I'm in the 1%, but it's the bottom, unfortunately.
You're in a very special one.
Could you beat this kid at chess, Simon? That's what I want to know.
Anyway, that is all for tonight's show, but quickly, let's take another look at Tuesday's front pages. To round up, we have the Daily Mail with What the Hell is the West Waiting For? Still waiting after another hour, The Guardian Prime Minister admits questions need answering on Zahawi tax. The Times had the Met risking hiring rogue officers with their online testing protocol. The Telegraph have the disturbing story of a killer who posed as a child to claim asylum and murder again in the United Kingdom. The Eye had Zahawi facing sack as PM demands answers on Tory chair's unpaid tax. The Financial Times, which I think we missed earlier, we have now Zahawi fights for political life over tax scandal as Sunak orders ethics review. The Daily Star, finally, with you. Don't need a Daily Star lettuce to see how this one ends. That's it for this evening. Thanks to my brilliant guests, Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. Headliners is back tomorrow at 11 with me, Leo Kearse and Ben Norris. Good night.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Good evening. Accusations of Tory sleaze. Yes, it's not a great start for Rishi Sunak's premiership, but is he a leader? Is he being decisive? We'll debate that. We'll find out that over half of British households are now net receivers from the state in this country. The report's author joins us. Energy rationing, effective energy rationing, starts this week. Believe me, you need to find out and learn more about it. And joining me on Talking Pints, when he comes from a Kent cricketing dynasty, he's a former England cricket captain, Chris Cowdrey. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story on GB News this evening. The Prime Minister has asked his independent ethics advisor to investigate the Tory party chair's tax affairs. Nadeem Zahawi has welcomed the investigation, saying he's confident he acted properly throughout. The former Chancellor has admitted, though, he paid a penalty to HMRC following an error over shares in the polling company YouGov, which he co-founded. He hasn't disclosed the size of the settlement, which is believed to be almost £5 million. And the BBC chairman, Richard Sharp, says he welcomes a review of the processes around being appointed to the role by the Commissioner of Public Appointments. That's after Mr Sharp asked for a scrutiny panel to examine potential conflicts of interest, following claims he was involved in securing a loan of up to £800,000 for Boris Johnson. He insists he didn't make a loan or arrange any financing and only made an introduction to a guarantor. Well, also today, thousands of ambulance workers are striking for the third time in 5 weeks. Unison and GMB union members across England and Wales walked out, along with staff at 2 hospital trusts in Liverpool. Further industrial action is planned in the coming weeks by nurses and other NHS workers. Union leaders are calling for fair pay, accusing the government of not wanting to find a resolution. And as you've been hearing, households with smart meters could receive discounts if they cut their energy use for the second day in a row. 26 suppliers signed up to the National Grid's Demand Flexibility Scheme, which involves paying businesses and households to turn off appliances for an hour or 2. The electricity system says it's going to run the scheme again tomorrow afternoon after the first live test ran from 5 until 6 p.m. today. And Ofgem says the energy price cap could fall below £3,000 from April. It said due to the fall in the wholesale price of gas and electricity, it was possible to lower average costs for households. It would mean little savings for energy users due to the government's price guarantee, which protects from higher prices. But it could save the government billions of pounds. And an update for you on the fire in Scotland today in Edinburgh. A firefighter is, in fact, we're told, fighting for their life after battling a blaze at the famous former department store in the centre of Edinburgh. Scottish Fire and Rescue were called to the Jenners building at around 11:30 this morning. We understand 22 emergency vehicles sent to the scene. The Fire Brigades Union saying at least 5 firefighters have had to be taken to hospital for treatment. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. Well, after the chaos of 2022, 3 prime ministers, 4 chancellors, 5 education secretaries. No, what we were going to get with Rishi Sunak. It was perfectly clear. He told us at the start, this government will have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. Well, what is happening right now is a nightmare for him. We begin, of course, with former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, his relationship with Richard Sharp, the BBC chairman. Now, nobody here is suggesting any impropriety at all, but it's clear that Mr Sharp made an introduction and helped facilitate in some way a loan, a quite perfectly legal loan that Boris Johnson took. But again, it all begins to look like a little bit of an Oxbridge charmocracy. More seriously is Nadeem Zahawi, who was for a brief period of time the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Now, he has been found to have underpaid his taxes. No suggestion, by the way, he was deliberately and willfully not paying his taxes. And when you sell shares in a big company and you've got overseas holdings, it is complicated, but very difficult for somebody as Chancellor of the Exchequer not to be paying tax when at the same time this government is putting taxes up for the rest of us. More seriously, I think, the Greenshill scandal that, if you remember, David Cameron was very deeply involved in. When asked by officials in his own department in response to a Freedom of Information request from the Times whether he'd exchanged messages with David Cameron, Zahawi said no, but it now turns out that actually he did. I think it's very difficult for Nadeem Zahawi to stay on as chairman of the Conservative Party. I think it's inevitable that he'll be forced to resign at some point in time. I could be wrong, but I've seen this pattern played out again and again and again. And what in the face of all of this does Rishi Sunak as leader do? Well, he palms it all off to Laurie Magnus, his new ethics advisor, who will investigate, which means the saga now goes on for weeks and weeks unless Zahawi is removed. My question to you, is Rishi Sunak a leader? Let me know what you think. Farage at gbnews.uk. And I think he looks very, very unsure of his footing. And I think this is going to bring them huge trouble when Zahawi inevitably has to resign. Right, that's my view. That's what I think. Let's go to somebody who'll be rather more directly affected by this than me. It's the Member of Parliament for Mansfield, Ben Bradley. Ben, good evening. Thank you for joining us. I know you've got votes coming up in the House fairly shortly. You know, we can go back to 1996, 1997, and, you know, OK, you were young then, but it was the look of sleaze that did the Conservative Party so much harm. Do you really believe that Nadeem Zahawi can stay on as party chairman when over Greenshill he clearly hasn't told the truth?
Well, look, I think being held to the highest standard is really important in public office. I think clearly, Nadeem's made a mistake one way or another. I don't know enough of the detail behind the scenes to say he should stay or go or whatever. I'm perfectly willing to give what I think is a good colleague the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. But to be honest, for most of my constituents and most of us in Parliament getting on with our actual jobs, it's not been the front and centre of attention. We've got things to do.
Oh, no, you've got a lot to do. I don't doubt that for one moment. But, you know, if you're running a company and there's a problem over a senior member of staff, I would suggest what you do is you